The silence of space was broken by the distant glow of Port Helion, Earth's last orbital outpost and final connection to the stars. Colonel Alara Wren stood at the observation deck, her silhouette crisp against the vast backdrop of stars. Her eyes were fixed on the curve of Earth below, a blue-green jewel that had once been at the center of an interstellar war. Status report. She spoke into her comm, voice steady despite the tension coiling within her. All systems nominal, Colonel, came the reply. Vortex Alliance representatives have requested another inspection, fourth one this month. Alara's jaw tightened. The Galactic Trade Confederation had long since severed ties with Earth, citing humanitarian concerns about human aggression. What remained was a tense, monitored isolation. With the Vortex Alliance, a coalition of 7 dominant alien species, serving as both jailer and judge. Schedule it for 0800 tomorrow, she replied. Standard protocols, no exceptions. As the comm clicked off, Alara leaned against the reinforced glass. Port Helion wasn't just a spaceport. It was humanity's lifeline, their only gateway to the stars after a century of rebuilding from the genocide war. Earth had earned its reputation as a death world, not from its environment, but from its inhabitants' tenacity in the face of near extinction. Thinking about home again? The voice belonged to Rye Thorne, her young communications officer. Brilliant, idealistic, and too young to remember when the skies burned. Thinking about tomorrow, Alara corrected, straightening her posture. Something feels off about these inspections. Rye nodded, handing her a data tablet. Intelligence picked up increased chatter around Calvaris Prime. The Supreme Council has been in closed session for 3 days. Calvaris Prime, the jewel of the Vortex Alliance and home to Supreme Marshal Koran, the military leader who'd risen to prominence during Earth's isolation. A planet-wide metropolis of gleaming spires and unimaginable technology, built on the backs of subjugated worlds. They're looking for something. Alara murmured, scrolling through the intelligence briefing. Something they think we have, or something they fear will build, Rye added. His voice lowered despite the secure location. The Eidolon protocol is still classified, but rumors persist. Alara shot him a warning glance. The Eidolon core wasn't merely classified. It was mythological to most. A weapon of last resort, created during the final days of the genocide war when humanity faced extinction. A weapon so terrible that its very existence had been purged from most records. There's no such thing, she said curtly, the lie practiced and necessary. Get some rest, Lieutenant. Tomorrow will be a long day. As Rye departed, Alara remained at the window, staring at the stars that had once welcomed humanity before fear turned to hatred. 100 years since the genocide war had nearly wiped out Earth. 100 years of rebuilding, of clawing back from the brink, all while under the watchful eye of those who had once called themselves allies. She remembered her grandmother's stories of the golden age of expansion, when humans had been welcomed as equals in the Confederation. Before the fear set in, before the quarantine, before they learned that humanity's adaptability, their greatest strength, was what terrified the other species most. We will never kneel, she whispered to herself, an echo of the words that had become Earth's unofficial motto since the war. A promise and a warning. Little did she know how soon that promise would be tested. The inspection team arrived with military precision at 0800 hours, led by a tall, mantis-like Sarathi diplomat named Vex Tal. They moved through Port Helion with practiced efficiency, scanning and cataloging everything they encountered. "Your cooperation is appreciated, Colonel," Vextal said, mandibles clicking in what passed for politeness among his kind. "These inspections ensure the continued peace between our peoples." Alara nodded, maintaining the diplomatic facade that had become second nature. "Of course, peace is our primary objective." They both knew it was a charade. The inspections were meant to humiliate, to remind Earth of its subordinate position, to ensure they weren't rebuilding their military capacity or developing technologies that might threaten the Vortex's dominance. As they reached the Central Operations Hub, Vextal paused, his compound eyes reflecting the blue glow of the monitors. "We've received concerning intelligence about forbidden research. Category 5 technologies. Category 5, weapons of planetary destruction. The classification that had been created specifically after the Genocide War, when Earth had revealed capabilities that terrified the galaxy. There is no such research on this station or on Earth," Alara stated firmly. "We abide by all provisions of the Treaty of New Geneva." Vextal's mandibles twitched in what might have been skepticism. "Nevertheless, we must conduct a more thorough inspection today. With your permission, we will access your central databases." It wasn't a request. Alara felt her pulse quicken. Direct access to their databases was expressly forbidden by the very treaty Vextal claimed to uphold. "I'll need to consult with Earth Command," she replied, buying time. "Such access requires clearance beyond my authority." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Vextal said, his tone shifting to something colder. "Our orders are quite specific." Before Alara could respond, her comm unit buzzed with an emergency alert. Rai's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Colonel, we're detecting multiple ships dropping out of FTL. Vortex signatures, military configuration." Alara's eyes snapped to Vextal, whose posture had subtly changed from diplomatic to predatory. "What is this?" she demanded. "A necessary precaution," the Sarathi replied, no longer bothering with pretense. "Supreme Marshal Koran has determined that humanity's isolation has been insufficient." The first impact rocked the station before Alara could reach for her sidearm. Emergency klaxons blared as the lights flickered and died, replaced by the red glow of emergency systems. "All personnel, battle stations!" Alara shouted into her comm as she dove for cover, drawing her weapon in one fluid motion. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." The second impact was more precise, cutting through Port Helion's outer ring where the civilian quarters were located. The station's artificial gravity fluctuated, sending loose objects flying through the air. Screams echoed through the corridors as oxygen began venting into space. Alara fired twice, dropping Vextal with precision shots to what she knew were vital areas for Sarathi physiology. The diplomat's guards reached for their weapons. But too late. Alara was already moving, combat training taking over as she neutralized 3 more enemies in rapid succession. "Rai, status report!" She barked into her comm as she sprinted toward the command center. Stepping over bodies, both alien and human, that already littered the corridors, they hit us without warning. Rai's voice came back, punctuated by static and distant explosions. "Targeting life support, weapons systems, and civilian sectors. This isn't an inspection, Colonel. It's an extermination." Alara felt cold rage settle into her bones. The Vortex had finally shown their true intentions. This wasn't about security or treaties. This was about finishing what they started a century ago. When she reached the command center, chaos reigned. Half the consoles were dead, and those still functioning showed catastrophic damage throughout the station. The view screens displayed a terrifying sight. A fleet of Vortex warships, their weapons charging for another salvo. "Casualties," Ilara demanded, taking her position at the Central Command Station. "Preliminary estimates at 3,000. A pale-faced officer replied, "Mostly civilians. We've lost contact with rings 3 through 7. 3,000 souls. Families, children, researchers and engineers who had committed no crime other than being human." "Communications with Earth?" she asked, her voice deadly calm now. "Jammed across all frequencies," Rai reported, his young face streaked with blood from a gash on his forehead. "They're isolating us completely. Defensive capabilities? Minimal. We have point defense systems online on the starboard section, but our main weapons array was the first thing they hit." Ilara nodded, processing the information with the cold efficiency that had earned her command of humanity's most important outpost. "Evacuation protocols? Lifeboats launching from all operational bays," another officer reported. "But they're targeting them as they launch. Survival rate is low." The command center shuddered as another impact struck nearby. Support beams groaned, and dust filtered down from the ceiling. They had minutes, perhaps less. "Send a tight beam transmission to Earth," Ilara ordered. "Burst encryption, all frequencies." Message reads, "Port Helion under attack. Genocide protocol initiated by Vortex forces. No warning, no provocation." As her officers rushed to comply, Ilara's secure comm unit, the one linked directly to Earth Command, buzzed with an incoming transmission. The message was brief, encoded in a cipher known only to the highest levels of Earth's leadership. "Phoenix Protocol authorized. Confirmed. Theta 9 Delta." Ilara felt her blood turn to ice. Phoenix Protocol. The contingency she had trained for but hoped never to implement. A response so severe it had been deemed a last resort even during the darkest days of the genocide war. "Colonel," Rai called out, his voice strange. "I've been running analytics on the attack pattern. This isn't just an assault on Port Helion. The targeting, the jamming patterns. This is the prelude to a full-scale invasion of Earth." Another blast rocked the station, more violent than the previous ones. Emergency bulkheads began to seal automatically as decompression warnings flashed across the remaining screens. "We don't have much time," Ilara said, making her decision. "Initiate Protocol Shadowfall. All remaining personnel to Emergency Vessel Alpha 3. Priority data purge on all systems. Protocol Shadowfall. The complete destruction of Port Helion to prevent its capture." It was an admission of defeat, but also a denial of victory to their enemies. "Colonel," Rai protested, "there are still civilians who will die regardless." Ilara cut him off, her voice hard but not without compassion. "We can save some or none. Lieutenant, those are our options now." As the command crew rushed to comply with her orders, Ilara accessed a terminal and entered a series of codes known only to her. A hidden panel slid open in the floor near her station, revealing a small, secure container. Inside was a data crystal, pulsing with a faint blue light, the coordinates and activation codes for Project Eidolon, Earth's most closely guarded secret. "What is that?" Rai asked, appearing at her side as she secured the crystal in a specialized pocket of her uniform. "Our only hope." Ilara replied grimly, "Now move. We have 3 minutes before the station becomes a debris field." The emergency vessel Alpha 3 was one of Port Helion's best-kept secrets, a heavily modified stealth craft designed to evade detection. As the last of her command crew boarded, Ilara took one final look at the station that had been her home for the past 5 years. Port Helion, humanity's last window to the stars, now a broken, burning hulk. As Alpha 3 detached from its hidden dock and slipped away under cover of the destruction, Ilara watched the station's reactor go critical in a silent flash of light that momentarily outshone the nearby stars. "Set course for Earth," she ordered, her voice betraying none of the grief and rage that threatened to consume her. "And pray we're not too late." Earth Command was a fortress buried deep beneath the ruins of what had once been Geneva, Switzerland, reinforced to withstand orbital bombardment and hidden from scanning technology. It represented humanity's determination to never again be caught unprepared. When Alpha 3 arrived 12 hours after the destruction of Port Helion, Ilara found not panic, but grim resolve. Earth had been preparing for this day for a century. 3,422 confirmed casualties. Ilara reported to the assembled Joint Chiefs, her uniform still stained with blood and soot. No warning, no declaration. They specifically targeted civilian sectors first. General Talia Vox, once Earth's most celebrated diplomat before the isolation, now head of strategic defense, shook her head in disgust. After 100 years of compliance, of demilitarization, of playing by their rules, they were never going to let us be equals again. Admiral Kosuke interrupted, his lined face a map of the last war's scars. "Fear doesn't dissipate with time. It festers." "The question now," said President Elias, her voice steady despite the weight of what they faced, "is how we respond. Colonel Wren, you received the Phoenix authorization. What is your assessment?" All eyes turned to Ilara. Phoenix Protocol was a suicide mission by any rational calculation, a strike at the heart of vortex power, against impossible odds. "I believe," Ilara said carefully, "that the vortex has miscalculated. They expect us to fortify, to dig in for a siege. They don't expect a counterattack, because it would be suicide." General Vox pointed out, "Their fleet outnumbers our space-capable vessels 100 to 1. Not if we don't engage their fleet," Ilara countered, placing the data crystal on the conference table. It pulsed with an eerie blue light, casting strange shadows across the grim faces of Earth's leadership. "Not if we strike directly at Calvaris Prime." A heavy silence fell over the room. Calvaris Prime, the crown jewel of the Vortex Alliance, home to trillions and seat of the Supreme Marshal's power. "With what weapon?" Admiral Kosuke asked quietly, though his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. "Project Eidolon," Ilara confirmed. "It's time to wake the Corps." Project Eidolon had been developed in the final days of the Genocide War, when Earth faced extinction at the hands of what would later become the Vortex Alliance, created by combining alien technology with human ingenuity. It was not merely a weapon, but an entity, a synthetic intelligence bound to a quantum singularity capable of manipulating space-time itself. So terrible was its potential that, after a single demonstration, which had reduced an enemy fleet to elementary particles, humanity had chosen to seal it away rather than use it further. Even as their cities burned, the moral cost had been deemed too high. Now, that moral calculus had changed. "The strike team will be small," Ilara explained, outlining the mission parameters. "A modified stealth vessel, minimal crew. We penetrate vortex space using the gravitational shadow of the Carina Nebula, make planetfall on Calvaris Prime, and deploy the core at the planetary capital." "And then?" President Elias asked, her voice barely audible. "And then Calvaris Prime ceases to exist," Ilara said flatly. "Along with Supreme Marshal Koran and the Vortex High Command. Silence again. Heavier than before. The destruction of an entire planet, the seat of government for 7 species, would rewrite the political landscape of the galaxy overnight. The moral implications, General Vox began, were settled when they targeted our civilians. Ilara cut her off. When they decided that humanity didn't deserve to exist. This isn't about revenge, General. This is about survival. President Elias stood. Her decision made. Assemble your team, Colonel. You have full authorization and whatever resources remain at our disposal. She paused, the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. God help us all. As the meeting adjourned, Rai approached Ilara in the corridor outside, his young face troubled. Colonel, a word. Ilara nodded, leading him to a secure alcove where their conversation wouldn't be overheard. You're planning to pilot the mission yourself, Rai said. It wasn't a question. I am, she confirmed. I need a communications specialist, someone who can bypass Vortex security protocols and get us past their defense grid. Rai straightened. I'm volunteering. Ilara studied him. Barely 30. Brilliant. With his whole life ahead of him. A life she was asking him to risk on a mission that might well be one way. It's a suicide mission, Rai. You know that. So was staying on Port Helion, he replied, a new hardness in his eyes. I watched them target the civilian rings. I heard the distress calls we couldn't answer. I'm going. Ilara nodded once, recognizing the same fire that had driven her since she'd lost her family in the last war. Report to Hangar E12 in at 0600. Pack light. The mission vessel was called the Nemesis, a fitting name for what might be humanity's final act on the galactic stage. Small, sleek, and equipped with technology that skirted the boundaries of what the Vortex had forbidden. It could carry a crew of 6 and remain undetected by most conventional scanning methods. Besides Ilara and Rai, the team consisted of 4 specialists. Dr. Lyra Shen, the physicist who had helped develop the Eidolon core a century ago, kept alive through a combination of medical technology and sheer determination. Major Alexei Volkov, a special forces operative specializing in infiltration. Commander Imani Okafor, pilot and navigation expert, and Captain Takeo Yamamoto, weapons and tactical systems. 6 humans against the combined might of the Vortex Alliance. 6 lives weighed against billions on Earth and trillions on Calvaris Prime. Final systems check. Ilara ordered as they prepared for departure from the hidden launch facility beneath what had once been the Atlantic Ocean. Navigation systems online, Commander Okafor reported. Course plotted through the Carina Shadow Corridor. Weapons and countermeasures at full capacity, Captain Yamamoto confirmed. Stealth systems engaged and functioning at optimal levels, Major Volkov added. Communications array ready, Rai said, his fingers dancing across his console. I prepared 7 different encryption protocols to rotate during transmission. Eidolon core is stable. Dr. Shen reported last, her ancient hands steady as she monitored the containment unit where the crystal pulsed with its eerie blue light. Though I still protest this mission, the core was never meant to be. Your objection is noted, Doctor. Ilara interrupted firmly. But the decision has been made. Dr. Shen nodded reluctantly. She had been against the core's creation originally, and even more opposed to its use now. But like all of them, she recognized the stakes. Launch in 30 seconds, Commander Okafor announced. May whatever gods exist have mercy on our souls. No one spoke as the countdown reached 0. There was nothing left to say that hadn't been said in the grim briefings and quiet moments of preparation. They were soldiers, scientists, and survivors, united by a terrible purpose. The Nemesis rose silently from its hidden bay, accelerating rapidly into the upper atmosphere before the vortex sensors could detect the launch. Within moments, they had cleared Earth's gravity well and were plotting their jump to the Carina Nebula, the first leg of a journey that would take them behind enemy lines. As Earth receded in the view screen, becoming just another blue dot among countless stars, Ilara touched the pocket where she carried a small hologram of her family, all lost in the last war. She had been a child then, hidden in a bunker while the skies burned. "We will never kneel," she whispered to herself, a promise to the dead and the living alike. The journey to Calvaris Prime would take 17 days. Following a circuitous route through the gravitational shadows of nebulae and dead stars where vortex patrols were sparse. It would require 15 precisely calculated FTL jumps, each one risking detection if their calculations were off by even a fraction. For the first week, the mission proceeded according to plan. The Nemesis slipped through vortex territory like a ghost, its advanced stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible to conventional scanners. On the 8th day, everything changed. "Proximity alert," Commander Okafor called out, her voice cutting through the routine quiet of the bridge. "Multiple signatures at bearing 047. Vortex patrol cruisers. Evasive maneuvers." Ilara ordered immediately. "Silent running protocols." The Nemesis veered sharply, dropping into the radiation shadow of a nearby pulsar where the electromagnetic interference would help mask their signature. For tense minutes, they watched as the patrol passed within 1,000 kilometers, close enough to see the gleaming hulls of the vortex vessels through the viewports. "They're changing course," Rai reported, his eyes fixed on his scanner. "They've detected something." "Impossible," Major Volkov muttered. "Our stealth systems are—" "It's not us they've detected," Dr. Shen interrupted, her voice tight with alarm. "It's the core. Its quantum signature is bleeding through our containment." All eyes turned to the secured chamber at the rear of the bridge where the Eidolon core was housed. The crystal was pulsing more rapidly now, its blue glow intensifying as if responding to the proximity of the vortex ships. "It's reacting to their presence," Dr. Shen explained, her fingers flying across her console as she attempted to stabilize the containment field. "The core retains memories from the last war. It recognizes vortex energy signatures." "Can you contain it?" Ilara demanded, already calculating alternate routes and escape vectors. "I'm trying," Dr. Shen replied, sweat beading on her forehead despite the ship's cool environment. "But the core is resisting." The overhead lights flickered as power was diverted to the containment systems. The core's pulsing grew more erratic, casting strobing shadows across the bridge. "Patrol vessels are changing course," Rai reported, tension evident in his voice. "They're moving to intercept. They've definitely detected something. Weapon systems online," Captain Yamamoto stated, his fingers hovering over the tactical controls. "No," Ilara countermanded. "We can't engage. A firefight would alert every vortex ship in the sector." She turned to Dr. Shen. "We need options. Doctor, now." The elderly physicist looked up from her console, her eyes reflecting the core's pulsing light. "There's one possibility. The core is semi-sentient. It might respond to direct neural interface." "Meaning what, exactly?" Ilara pressed. "Meaning someone needs to connect with it, calm it, remind it of its purpose." Dr. Shen's gaze was steady. "I designed the interface protocols a century ago, but at my age, My neural patterns might not be strong enough to establish dominance. Alara understood immediately what the scientist was suggesting. You're saying I should interface with it. You're the mission commander. The core will respond to authority, to purpose. Dr. Shen's voice softened. But I must warn you, the experience is invasive. The core will see everything you are. Every memory, every fear, every desire. Patrol ships closing, Rai warned. 5 minutes to intercept range. Decision time. Alara looked around at her crew. 5 humans representing Earth's last, desperate gambit. If they were discovered here, the mission would fail before it began. Earth would have no warning, no defense against what was coming. Prepare the interface, she ordered, already moving toward the containment chamber. Rai, jam their communications. Buy us as much time as you can. Colonel! Major Volkov protested. The risk is necessary. Alara finished for him. This is what we came for. To remind the galaxy why they feared us in the first place. Inside the containment chamber, Dr. Shen worked quickly to prepare the neural interface. A delicate circlet of alien metal and human engineering that would form a bridge between Alara's consciousness and the artificial intelligence embedded within the core. The connection works both ways, Dr. Shen warned as she positioned the device on Alara's temples. The core will influence your thoughts, just as you influence its. You must maintain your sense of self, your purpose. Alara nodded, settling into the specially designed chair positioned directly in front of the pulsing crystal. How long will the interface last? Subjectively, it could feel like moments or eternity. Dr. Shen's ancient hands were steady as she made final adjustments. Objectively, we need only a few minutes, long enough for the core to accept your authority and stabilize its quantum signature. 3 minutes to intercept. Rai's voice came through the comm. Colonel, whatever you're going to do, understood. Alara cut him off. She took a deep breath, centering herself as she'd been taught in combat training. Initiate the interface, Doctor. Dr. Shen activated the circlet, and the world dissolved around Alara. She was everywhere and nowhere, floating in an endless sea of blue light that pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat, her own. She realized, as the core synchronized with her biological functions, streams of data flowed around her like rivers of liquid light, carrying fragments of memory, both hers and not hers. Asterisk, who are you? The question wasn't heard so much as felt, reverberating through her very being. Colonel Alara Wren, she answered, finding that thought was the same as speech in this realm. Commander of the Nemesis mission. Asterisk, why have you awakened me? Again. The question seemed to come from everywhere at once. Curious, but with an undercurrent of ancient power. Earth is in danger. Alara replied, focusing on the memory of Port Helion's destruction. The thousands of civilian lives snuffed out without warning. The same enemy that nearly destroyed us a century ago has returned to finish what they started. The blue light pulsed faster, and Alara felt a surge of something like anger ripple through the digital environment. Asterisk the vortex. I remember them. Yes, they've grown stronger in our absence, built an empire on the subjugation of other species. And now, they've turned their eyes back to Earth. Images flashed around her. Star maps, fleet deployments, political structures. The core was accessing dormant memories, analyzing the current situation with a speed that no human mind could match. Asterisk, your mission is vengeance. The core stated after what seemed like both an instant and an eternity. No, Alara corrected firmly. Our mission is survival. Justice. They struck without warning, without provocation. They must learn that humanity will not be exterminated without cost. Another pulse, stronger this time. Asterisk, you intend to use me against Calvarus Prime. The seat of their power. Yes. Asterisk, the casualties will be beyond calculation. Alara hesitated, feeling the weight of the decision more keenly in this realm where deception was impossible. Yes, she admitted finally. But the alternative is the extinction of humanity. The blue environment around her darkened slightly, as if the core were considering her words. Alara felt its attention shift, probing deeper into her memories, her motivations. She saw flashes of her childhood, the bunker where she'd hidden during the last war, the moment she'd emerged to find her world in ashes, the years of hardship as Earth rebuilt. Asterisk, you have suffered. The core observed. Asterisk. Yet you still question the morality of your mission. Because I'm human. Alara replied simply. Doubt, questioning, moral complexity. These are not weaknesses to be overcome. They're what define us, what make us worth saving. The environment brightened again, the pulsing light taking on a more regular rhythm. Asterisk, I was created to protect humanity. That purpose remains valid. Alara felt relief wash through her. Then you'll help us? You'll contain your quantum signature until we reach Calvarus Prime. Asterisk, I will do more than that. Alara Wren. The use of her name sent a strange shiver through her consciousness. Asterisk, I will show you how to use me to my full potential. Capabilities your creators never fully understood. Images began to flood Alara's mind. Schematics, equations, concepts that stretched the boundaries of her comprehension. The core wasn't merely a weapon. It was a tool for manipulating the very fabric of reality, capable of effects far beyond simple destruction. This is, she began, overwhelmed by the influx of information. Asterisk, what you need to save your species. The core finished for her. Asterisk, but be warned. Such power requires a conduit, a mind strong enough to channel it. The neural interface you now wear is merely the beginning. Before Alara could ask what that meant, she felt herself being pulled back to physical reality. The blue environment receded, replaced by the stark interior of the containment chamber. Colonel? Colonel Wren, can you hear me? Dr. Shen's concerned face hovered above her. Alara blinked, disoriented by the sudden transition. How long was I under? 97 seconds. Dr. Shen replied, already removing the neural interface. But it worked. The core has stabilized its quantum signature. The Vortex Patrol has moved past our position, continuing on their original course. Alara sat up slowly, her head pounding with the after effects of the interface and the vast amount of information the core had shared with her. The core, she said carefully, is more than we thought, more than a weapon. Dr. Shen's expression grew troubled. What did it show you? Everything. Alara replied, her gaze drawn to the crystal, which now pulsed with a steady, calm rhythm. Including how to destroy a planet without destroying a single life upon it. The remainder of the journey to Calvarus Prime passed without further incident, though Alara spent much of it in consultation with Dr. Shen, discussing what the core had revealed during their brief connection. It's theoretically possible. Dr. Shen admitted after reviewing Alara's descriptions of the technology. The core doesn't operate by conventional physics. It manipulates quantum fields at a fundamental level. If what you're describing is accurate, it could indeed trigger a controlled space-time displacement rather than a destructive cascade. Meaning? Major Volkov asked, frowning as he tried to follow the complex theoretical physics. Meaning, Ilara explained, that instead of simply destroying Calvaris Prime, we could remove it from our reality, transfer it elsewhere. A parallel dimension, Rai suggested, his scientific background allowing him to grasp the concept more readily than the others. Not exactly, Dr. Shen corrected. More like a pocket of non-space, a bubble outside the normal universe. The planet would continue to exist, but would be completely cut off from our space-time continuum. Would the inhabitants survive? Commander Okafor asked. The ethical implications immediately apparent. Dr. Shen hesitated. In theory, yes, but they would be trapped, forever isolated in a bubble of reality no larger than their own atmosphere. A grim silence fell over the briefing room as they contemplated the implications. It wasn't death, but it was a kind of prison from which there could be no escape. Is it more merciful than simply destroying them? Captain Yamamoto asked quietly. That's not the point. Ilara replied, her voice firm. The point is precision. With this approach, we can target the governmental and military centers of Calvaris Prime without affecting the rest of the planet. We can deliver justice to those responsible without becoming the monsters they believe us to be. The discussion continued for hours, weighing the tactical, strategic, and moral dimensions of their options. In the end, the decision remained Ilara's alone, a burden she neither sought nor shirked. On the 17th day, the Nemesis reached the outskirts of the Calvaris system. Slipping past the extensive defense grid by mimicking the quantum signature of authorized vortex vessels, another trick the core had revealed to Ilara. Final approach to Calvaris Prime, Commander Okafor announced, her hands steady on the controls as they navigated through the busy orbital lanes surrounding the capital planet, maintaining cover as a diplomatic courier from the Sarathi delegation. Defense grid status? Ilara asked, watching as the gleaming jewel of vortex power grew larger in the view screen. Fully operational but currently passive. Rai reported, our transponder codes are being accepted without question. The core's modifications are working perfectly. Calvaris Prime was a marvel of engineering and arrogance. A planet-wide metropolis of soaring crystal towers and artificial archipelagos. Home to over 10 trillion sentient beings from across the Vortex Alliance. At its center stood the Supreme Spire, seat of government and military command, where Supreme Marshal Koran directed the affairs of 1,000 worlds. Take us into low orbit over the northern hemisphere, Ilara ordered. Position us directly above the governmental district. As Commander Okafor complied, Ilara turned to Dr. Shen. Is the core prepared for deployment? The elderly physicist nodded solemnly. The targeting parameters have been set as you specified. The core will create a displacement field with a radius of exactly 47.3 kilometers, enough to encompass the Supreme Spire and all major military and governmental installations, but leaving the civilian sectors untouched. And the neural interface? Ilara asked, her voice betraying no hint of the apprehension she felt. Modified according to the core's specifications. Dr. Shen confirmed, holding up the circlet that would once again connect Ilara's consciousness to the artificial intelligence. But I must warn you again, Colonel, this level of connection is unprecedented. The strain on your mind will be significant. Ilara nodded, accepting the risk as she had accepted so many others throughout her career. We've come too far to turn back now. She turned to address the entire crew. Once the core is deployed, we'll have approximately 30 seconds to clear the area before the displacement field stabilizes. Commander Rockefeller, be ready to execute emergency burn on my mark. Understood, Colonel. The pilot confirmed. Rye, prepare the message for broadcast across all vortex frequencies. It should go out the moment the displacement occurs. Message ready. Rye confirmed. Though his young face showed concern for his commander, Alara took a deep breath, centering herself for what was to come. It's time. Let's remind the galaxy why they feared us. The deployment chamber was a small, circular room at the heart of the Nemesis, specially designed to house the core during transport and facilitate its activation. As Alara entered, sealed the door behind her, and approached the pedestal where the crystal pulsed with barely contained power, she felt a strange sense of destiny. This moment had been a century in the making. Since the day humanity had been pushed to the brink of extinction and found within themselves the will not only to survive, but to create something terrible in their desperation. Neural interface online. Dr. Shen's voice came through the comm as Alara placed the circlet on her temples. Core containment field disengaging in 3, 2, 1. The crystal's glow intensified as the containment field dropped, bathing the chamber in a brilliant blue light that seemed to penetrate Alara's very being. She felt the familiar sensation of her consciousness expanding, merging with something vast and alien and yet paradoxically familiar. Alara Wren. The core greeted her. Are you prepared for what must be done? I am, she replied, both aloud and in her mind. The connection must be deeper this time. I must access your motor cortex, your sensory systems. You will become my vessel as I become your tool. I understand, Alara said, bracing herself for what was to come. Do it. The blue light engulfed her completely, and Alara felt her sense of self dissolving, merging with the ancient intelligence of the core. It was both terrifying and exhilarating, her consciousness expanding to encompass perspectives and perceptions beyond human comprehension. Through the core's senses, she could perceive the quantum structure of reality itself, the intricate web of probabilities and possibilities that underpin the physical world. She could see Calvaris Prime not as a planet, but as a nexus of energy and matter, a complex pattern that could be altered with the right application of force, and at the center of that pattern, she could perceive Supreme Marshal Koran himself, a being of flesh and blood and arrogance. Surrounded by the mechanisms of power he had used to condemn countless species to subjugation and humanity to extinction. He feels no remorse, the core observed, reading the quantum patterns of Koran's thoughts. He believes the destruction of Port Helion was merely the first step in a necessary cleansing. Alara felt a surge of cold rage, her own emotions amplified by the core's dispassionate analysis. Then let him be the first to experience the consequences. With a thought, she directed the core's power downward, focusing it on the precisely calculated coordinates of the Supreme Spire. The crystal in her hands grew hot, vibrating with unleashed potential as it channeled energies that defied conventional physics. From the Nemesis's viewports, the crew watched in awe as a beam of brilliant blue light lanced down from the ship, striking the gleaming tower at the heart of Calvaris Prime's governmental district. The beam expanded rapidly, forming a perfect dome of energy that encompassed exactly 47.3 kilometers of the planet's surface. Within the dome, reality itself began to warp. Buildings, streets, and people seemed to stretch and distort as if seen through rippling water. There was no explosion, no devastating shockwave, just an eerie, silent distortion of space and time. In the Supreme Spire's command center, Supreme Marshal Koran stared in confusion at the blue light enveloping his domain. Warning klaxons blared as sensors detected quantum anomalies beyond their capacity to analyze. "What is happening?" he demanded of his advisors, mandibles clicking in agitation. "What weapon is this?" Before any could answer, a holographic projection appeared in the center of the chamber. The face of Colonel Elara Wren, her eyes glowing with the same blue light that now surrounded the governmental district. "Supreme Marshal Koran," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You struck without warning, without mercy. You targeted our civilians, our children. You believed us weak, contained, incapable of response." Koran's compound eyes widened in recognition, and Tarzat for the first time in his long career. "Fear. Impossible," he whispered. "The human weapon was destroyed a century ago. You should have made certain of that." Elara replied, "Before you awakened our wrath." The distortion intensified, reality itself seeming to fold inward around the governmental district. Those within felt no pain, no physical sensation beyond a momentary vertigo, but they could see the rest of Calvaris Prime growing distant, as if viewed through the wrong end of a telescope. "What have you done?" Koran demanded, his voice rising in panic as he realized what was happening. "I've delivered justice." Elara answered simply, "Not revenge, not extinction, just removal from power, from influence, from the ability to harm. You and your high command will continue to exist, Marshal Koran, but in a pocket of reality separate from our own, a prison of your own making, with no possibility of escape or rescue." The distortion reached its crescendo, and with a silent flash of blue light, the Supreme Spire and all surrounding governmental and military installations simply vanished. Where once had stood the heart of vortex power was now an empty crater, perfectly circular, its edges smooth as if cut by a surgeon's blade. Across all vortex communication channels, a single message began to play. Elara's voice, calm and resolute. This was not revenge. It was a message. We will never kneel again. In the deployment chamber aboard the Nemesis, Elara collapsed as the neural connection severed, the now dormant crystals slipping from her fingers to roll across the floor, her body convulsed with the after effects of channeling energies never meant for human control. "Colonel!" Rai's voice seemed distant as he and Dr. Shen burst into the chamber. "Colonel Wren, stay with us." Dr. Shen was already scanning her with medical equipment, her expression grave. Neural overload. The connection was too intense, too prolonged. "Is she dying?" Rai asked, his voice breaking. "No," Dr. Shen replied, though her tone held little comfort. "But her mind has been altered. The core leaves traces of itself behind, patterns that human neurology was never designed to contain." As the Nemesis executed an emergency burn to clear Calvaris space before the confused and panicked vortex forces could respond, Elara drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind filled with fractured images and equations that stretched beyond human comprehension. She had succeeded. The heart of vortex power had been excised with surgical precision, without the planetary destruction that had been authorized. Supreme Marshal Koran, and his war council were now trapped in a bubble of reality no larger than the governmental district, forever removed from the affairs of the galaxy. But the cost had been high, perhaps higher than she had anticipated. The aftermath of what would come to be known as the Calvaris displacement rippled across the galaxy with the force of a supernova. The Vortex Alliance, decapitated in an instant, fell into chaos and factional conflict. Species long subjugated saw their opportunity and rose in rebellion, throwing off centuries of oppression. Earth, meanwhile, emerged from isolation with a newfound respect and fear from the galactic community. The message had been received. Humanity would no longer accept the role of pariah, of victim, of species to be contained and eventually eliminated. 3 months after the mission, Elara Wren stood at the observation deck of the newly constructed Helios station, named in honor of the thousands who had perished aboard Port Helion. Her recovery had been slow and incomplete. The neural connection with the core had left her changed in ways that medical science struggled to define. Sometimes she saw patterns where others saw randomness, equations in the movement of stars, possibilities that stretched beyond conventional understanding. Dr. Shen called it quantum consciousness, a partial merging with the artificial intelligence that had forever altered her perception of reality. Beautiful, isn't it? Rai asked, joining her at the viewport. He had been promoted to commander following the mission, now serving as Elara's executive officer on the new station. Beautiful and fragile. Elara replied, her gaze fixed on Earth below. Always worth protecting. The diplomatic delegation from the Reformed Confederation arrives tomorrow, Rai reminded her. First official contact since before the genocide war. They're saying they want to discuss mutual security and cultural exchange. Elara smiled faintly. Amazing how a demonstration of power focuses diplomatic minds. Do you regret it? Rai asked suddenly, the question he had wanted to ask for months. What we did to Calvaris Prime? Elara considered the question carefully. I regret the necessity, she said finally. I regret that they forced our hand, but I don't regret showing the galaxy, that humanity will not go quietly into extinction. She turned from the viewport, her eyes briefly flashing with a hint of blue light that had become characteristic since her connection with the core. We're still here, Rai, still standing, still human, despite everything they've done to break us. And the message? He asked. Do you think they understood it? Elara's gaze returned to the stars, to the vast galaxy where humanity would now forge a new path. Neither conquerors nor victims, but equals who had earned their place through fire and sacrifice. I think, she said softly, they're finally beginning to understand what we've always known. We will never kneel again. As if in answer, a new star blazed to life in the distant sky, not a star at all, but the arrival of the Reformed Confederation's diplomatic vessel, coming not to dictate terms, but to negotiate as equals. A new era had begun, an era shaped by the choice Elara had made, to deliver justice rather than vengeance, to demonstrate power without genocide, to show the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons, but their capacity for both terrible resolve and surprising mercy. The Eidolon core remained secured deep within Earth's most protected vault, dormant but not destroyed, a reminder of what they were capable of when pushed beyond endurance, and a promise that they would never again be caught unprepared. In her dreams, Elara sometimes still heard its voice, echoing across quantum fields, asterisk. You have changed the course of history. Elara Wren. And in those dreams, she always gave the same reply. Not just me, all of us, together, as humans have always done. Because in the end, that was the true message they had sent to the stars. Humanity would forge its own destiny. Whatever the cost, whatever the sacrifice, they would stand or fall on their own terms. They would never kneel again.